are live.
I don't know who that was, but this is the as yet untitled Adam Savage project. I'm Will. At Norm and Adam, of course,
I'm
are
Adam
here.
Savage.
And
I had a cold last week, so when I have a cold, I'll wake up in the morning and I've got the movie voice. Every summer, a film comes along.
Can you name that guy?
I love those guys. That video they did of all of them together was one of my favorite things that I've ever seen.
I haven't seen. I'll have to find that. The joke at the beginning of Tropic Thunder with the Ben Stiller trailers for that, where it's in a world, I don't know.
It used to just be one guy. I think he passed away, unfortunately. But it was. That whole trailer style was just a thing of the '90s.
Yes.
And now
now you can do it in iMovie.
Well, do you remember? Oh, really?
Yeah. There's basically the equivalent of an Instagram filter, which Norm's going to yell at me for saying. But you load your video in there, and it makes the trailer.
Before we even get started, I have a tangent, which is the one thing I dislike about credits in iMovie is please, people, you start your YouTube videos just right away and not give me 45 seconds of opening credits for everything.
And there's an internet rule for this.
Really?
Yes. It was actually on Reddit. I forgot like a Warnsworth constant or something. The first third of every video on the internet is useless.
It's totally
true.
That's right.
Yeah, so when people share links, you can cut off the first third.
Wait, we're in that part of the video right
maybe
now.
not our videos.
No, we are.
No.
What amazes me is there'll be like shots of like, I'm about to build this out of a bunch of normal materials. And then there's like a 13-second shot of a 2-liter soda bottle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you had editing software. Why are you still holding this shot?
Well, it's like when you show the slideshow of your trip to Egypt, right? You don't want to take away the picture of the inside of the pyramid, even though you're really horribly underexposed and all you can see is the light outside.
Yes.
It's hard to kill your babies, even for the home YouTube filmmaker. Let's talk about being a geek dad.
Okay.
Norm and I don't have kids. I have a dog
that you know of.
That is definitely true.
Very true.
So yeah, no one's come forth to claim child support yet. But one of the things that you were just on the cover of Wired.
Yes.
Talking about the Geek Dad movement,
Yeah.
which I have been following as closely as I can without looking like some sort of internet creep for the last 5 or 6 years.
Right.
Because it's a really interesting, one of the things to me walking around Maker Faire is the amazing thing is that you see these 5 and 6 year old kids walking around chasing robots and seeing like underwater submarines that some dude made in his backyard, and they treat it as if it's not something out of the ordinary, which is awesome.
Yes.
Because it's just, every year we get to go to this place and there's these things, and I think that opens up a whole new way of looking at the world for kids that are that age.
I totally agree.
And that's part of what the Geek Dad thing.
What does being a geek dad mean to you?
Is that music going on? Oh, no, sorry. My hearing aid was feeding back. I thought I was hearing a didgeridoo, but it turned out to be my own hearing aid.
No didgeridoos in here. We can make that happen, though. I can load up some samples.
I believe I have a didge over in the corner there.
I should have known.
So being a geek dad, it's funny. Adam Rogers called me up and said, would you be interested in being on the cover of Wired for the Geek Dad issue? And I was like, absolutely, I would love to be there. And he said, we'd love you to write an article about cool stuff you've built with your kids. And my response was, I haven't built that much with my kids. I'm kind of a jerk about it. I'm not like I purposely don't build stuff with them, but I've only done like 3 or 4 craft days with them. And he was like, well, like what? And then I described them and he was like, great, write those up. And that's the article. So I try and inculcate my kids with an understanding of making things. But really, the main thing that I'm committed to with them, and just to be clear, I have twin 13-year-old boys. I call them Thing 1 and Thing 2.
Okay.
I think life is fine for them without having their names be plastered over the internet, so we'll just call them Thing 1 and Thing 2. And the thing that I do as a geek dad, if that is what I am a representative of, is I am always interested in fomenting whatever interest they have.
Okay.
Not to an absurd degree, but if they demonstrate an interest in something, I want to feed that interest.
So if their interest is Vietnam era machine guns, you go get a bunch of machine guns and you guys head up to Sutro Tower and take some beer bottles.
Well, a lot of times children look up to their parents, to find direction. So it's not that you're going to tell your kids, because I like comic books, you're going to like comic books.
Right.
But they see that, as a byproduct of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
That's how their interests form.
And they both have shown a facility for thinking through things in 3D in their heads. I understand that they both are pretty facile at that. Their primary interest over the last few years has been music. They've been playing in the what's now the San Francisco Rock Project. It started out as the School of Rock, but they shut it down here, and a bunch of the parents formed a nonprofit called SFRP. My boys have been playing there for at least 3 years. And they've become quite accomplished musicians. One plays guitar and sings, the other does bass and drums. And, I've got one of my son's old drum sets up here, a little Ludwig set. There's 5 or 6 guitars and basses between the two of them. Plus, if one wanted to lay down tracks, I went and got him an M Audio, translator for his laptop, so that he could actually play guitar and sing and lay it down in GarageBand. And he asked me if he could have that for his birthday, and I was like, no, actually, that I'll just buy you like next week, because and look, I have the luxury of being able to afford impulse purchases like that, but it's one of the things I want them to understand, that I consider feeding that desire really important. And, that my prioritization of that is in and of itself the gesture that I'm making.
I mean, and from talking to you about other stuff, it seems like you had a lot of that same thing happening with your parents as well.
Yeah.
Like this is a generational thing, not necessarily.
Right.
In another episode, you talked about having access to the charge account at the hardware store. So when you wanted to make something, you just went down. If you needed $15 worth of stuff, you bought $15 worth of stuff and loaded it on the bike and took it home.
And it went even farther than that. By the time I was, I guess, 15, I think, I was in art class in high school, and my art teacher, Mr. Benton, who I think might still be there, had a project. You have to build something completely out of corrugated cardboard. Now, I'd worked with cardboard before, and I came home and I told my dad, I get to build stuff out of cardboard. He's like, great, get in the car. And I got in the car, and he drove me all the way to his art supply store in Westchester County, and he bought me 10 sheets of 24 by 36 standard brown corrugated clean sheets. And I have to tell you, the thrill that I got from these being mine, and that I could do whatever I wanted with them. I could not believe this. And I still remember the feeling. I built 10 of everything for that assignment. I think I built the MTV logo. I built a full-size guitar. I built a turntable. I built a toaster. I built something I could wear. I mean, all of this out of corrugated cardboard. So my parents were very, very clear that my interests were a priority to them.
Well, and when you're talking about kids, especially kids that, I remember how kind of, I don't want to say attention deficit because that's probably wrong, but I was a very flighty kid. So I would be into something, and if I didn't either pick it up or I would try it out. If I liked it, then I would stick with it, and if I didn't, then I would let it go 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And I know that was a little bit of a challenge for my parents, because they didn't want to go out and buy a violin because I wanted to play violin,
right?
And then be stuck with the $300 violin
or
whatever.
Look, I ride that line also. It's quite difficult for me to ride. It's what's interesting is that that your profession is based on alighting on a subject, learning enough about it to communicate it, and then moving on to the next one. Right?
It worked out pretty well. I mean, I think if I hadn't found this, I'd probably I don't know what I would be doing right now, actually, but.
So when you're enabling your kids,
enabling is a great term,
right? Do you try to also make sure they appreciate that they're enabling them so they explore their interests to the fullest?
I do, absolutely. Okay. I mean, you're totally right. People who have seen me actively parent have occasionally commented on the fact that I'm a much stricter parent than they thought I would be. I don't brook a lot of back talk from my kids. I ride them pretty hard. I want them to get good grades, and I want them to behave themselves and say please and thank you and be good kids. I get mad at them and I yell at them just like any other parent does. And if I buy them something and they don't appreciate it or they trash it, I'll totally. Right. It's not like they get carte blanche to do what they want, but when they demonstrate an interest, so it's almost like sometimes I'll give them something entry level because I see that they're interested in something, and then I'll watch very carefully to see how they do with that, and if they give into it more, like my son picked up some juggling balls here a couple weeks ago, thing one, and he's become quite accomplished within 2 weeks at juggling. So he was here a few days later, and I was like, there's a second set of juggling balls upstairs. As long as you've got 3, you might as well have 6, because you could play around and learn 4, and then might as well. I would also still like to learn 5 juggling
5's real
balls.
hard.
I've never gotten it.
Yeah, I did it once for like like 1 lap, and then
Oh wow,
it all fell apart.
Oh wow, I've never
Never
even
been
gotten
able-
a
never even
single.
come
I've never even
close.
gotten a single cascade to happen twice. But
So you're saying being observational.
absolutely. I want to see. I also encourage. I also am a big believer in that encouragement. The parents who are like, "You're singing out of key." Nothing is sadder to me than making somebody self-conscious about the thing that they're trying.
So if you're there's two ways to look at this. If you're a kid who wants to try making stuff and maybe your parents aren't really into it, that's one side of this problem. And then the other side, and it's not really a problem, but the other thing is, what if you're an adult and you're into kind of making and all that, and you want to inculcate your kids? I guess we've kind of talked about that a little bit. But it's just kind of, you think it's an example situation, or
I think there's an example situation. I think if there's one thing I've learned as an adult, as I've unpacked all the neuroses that I have that keep me from, all the that keep me from being fully realized and enlightened, right? As you unpack all these things, one of the things I've discovered is that they're all based on decisions I made about the world when I was between 8 and 12 years old. Like, this is where you really start to go, oh, that's the way people act when that happens. That's the way things occur when you do that. And this is the important age to me, to let kids know that you can try stuff and you can fail, and it's totally cool. So I let my kids see me do that. They hear me talk about that, and they see my encouragement is based on effort, not necessarily the final output, because I've had so much experience with trying and failing at things.
Yeah.
I want them to be bold about trying stuff. That quote from Goethe is bold. Whatever you're thinking about doing, start it. Start it now. The boldness of starting it has genius, power, and magic in it. It's one of my all-time favorite quotes. And when the kid is interested in trying something, I always want to let them know that that's an okay thing to start to indulge.
Well, and while that interest is there, then
yeah.
Then
but the other thing is that the kids are going to get hurt trying one of the things that they're going to get hurt trying. Gaver Tully has a beautiful TED Talk, 10 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Kids Do, and it's based on his book, 100 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Kids Do. And it's things like getting your fingers stuck together with crazy glue, playing with fire, working with knives.
So this is all stuff that I did. I mean, I'm sure I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
Like, if I built paper models, you glued your fingers together.
Yes.
If there wasn't acetone in the house, you had a real problem, and
Yeah.
you'd eventually have to pry them apart. I guess there's a difference. There was a really good story about Taylor. I can't remember his last name. He's the kid who built the fusion reactor at Stanford. There were 2 stories about kids who built nuclear reactors on their own. One is this Taylor kid. The other is a kid who accidentally irradiated half of his neighborhood. Oh, and the difference was, the kid who irradiated his parents' neighborhood, his parents told him to stop, and he wasn't going to.
Right.
So he didn't have support, and they weren't able to put him in touch with people that were able to help him know what was safe and what wasn't.
This is a great origin story for
well,
a rivalry in the future.
Yeah, exactly. It's Lex Luthor and Superman, right?
Yeah.
And having your parents there to help steer you so you don't do things that are dangerous, like learn to cast resin in a closed garage.
Yes.
Or
you have to guide them on things like that, like using the bandsaw or using a knife, even just as simple as using a knife, cut away from them. Those simple things. As in his TED Talk, Gaver says, you let them use a knife, but you teach them the rules of a knife. Keep it sharp, point it away from you.
Yeah, and they're going to cut themselves.
And never strain.
Yeah.
Right? The moment you're... all the stitches in my hands are from, I wonder if,
right through the meat. Yeah,
right.
It's not good.
And recognize that they're going to get hurt, that they're going to bruise themselves in trying these things, and that's also important part of the process.
So this is kind of a tangent, but then what do you think about, like, one of the things that surprised me was that playground over on DuBose. I used to live across the street from it, the one in DuBose Park, has this weird rubberized padded floor.
Yeah,
the bark was too dangerous, which seems a little weird to me as a kid who grew up playing on gravel and asphalt. I mean, do you think that whole the whole we've got to protect the kids at all costs, even from themselves, is this a counter to that, or are these two things completely unrelated?
Yeah,
Or
well, kids are going to hurt themselves no matter what. It's a good question. I think that I don't necessarily think that padded playgrounds or uh, and that ilk are going to somehow over insulate kids from exploring because it's a natural childlike thing to explore. I think the thing that is really inhibiting is the idea that whatever they're exploring, how do I put this? There has to be the capacity for failure. That's
okay,
the problem with our litigious society is, someone says, you built a sidewalk and 2 levels were different. That failure made me trip and thus you owe me $100,000. So someone's like, at Industrial Light and Magic, we had a parking lot where you really needed a mirror to be able to see oncoming traffic. But what we had heard, the rumor, and I don't know if this is true or not, was that they wouldn't put up the mirror because the mirror would instantly make them responsible for any accident that happened there.
Yeah.
yeah,
Now that idea, which is you can't fail, which is really you can't fail. Failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Is actively doing bad in the world because they're making accidents more likely.
Yeah.
Again, because the example of your kid not getting supervision, and if no one's shown you how to use a knife, but you're using one in the corner, you're going to get into a lot of you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, exactly. So parents, if your kid has exhibited maker tendencies and you want to know where to start, like what are some resources for? Because I know we have a lot of guys who are our age in the audience who are listening and they have 5-10
Make Magazine's phenomenal. Again, you know what? I go back to, we did this a while back with the podcast of just choose a project to get started making.
Yeah.
Right. So open up Make Magazine and see the one that your kid points at. Open up Instructables or, look at the movies and talk about things that they want to do. It's funny. I mean, sorry, I have to give this caveat here because I feel like I sound like some sort of paragon of geek parenting in some way, and I don't feel like that at all. I am just as confused. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
It
there's
sounds
between
like a
music-
a timpani factory has opened up outside the loading door.
It's sheet metal unrolled on one side, music on the other, and then there's a guy singing somewhere in there. I don't know what's going on.
The fact is I am just as concerned about how to raise my kids as anybody else is, and I fail just as often as everybody else does. I happen to have this. I happen to be a communicator about making, and so in this regard, I think I am pretty good at knowing that I'm supporting my kids' interest in things. And I think that that is super, super vital. I think that the world is full of people who think, I wish I had the guts to try making something out of wood or welding something. And the fact is, all of these things are not difficult to go and do.
Yeah.
And the entry level for almost all of them is surpassingly small. You can buy a welder for $150 on Craigslist. It's not going to weld very much, but at least you'll get somewhere with it.
Well, or if you want to learn how to use it, you can go to the adult extension classes or tech shop.
And we have tech shop. So, I mean, again, it's also like, if you're not sure what your kid's interested in, you take them to tech shop, take them to a class there.
Yeah.
And my mom, I remember one summer, I think I was junior high school. So I was probably 12 or 13. It was exactly my kid's age. She just took me to I took like 5 different classes in making things at the local Westchester Community College.
Yeah.
And there was like pottery and there was like jewelry and there was this other stuff. And I remember just having a crazy great time doing it.
It's amazing because one of the things in my high school that they did that was an innovation in I guess this was the 80s by then, but they separated out all the vocational stuff, all the making stuff, all of the the shop and the woodwork and the machining and the auto repair and all that stuff, and put it in an entirely different wing of the high school where it didn't quite make it impossible for you to take classes in the normal part and then switch over to the other part.
Yeah.
But it definitely dissuaded you, which I think was it's bizarre looking back now.
Well, we should go back. I mean, the whole conversation started with this idea of being a geek dad, and we've had this conversation before where that it doesn't need to just be a geek dad. I know there's a geek mom blog now.
Oh yeah, no.
And so I know geek parent doesn't sound as enticing, but it is a family activity.
Well, and look, being geek, if we're going to define our terms, which is
Right.
absolutely appropriate, and we should have done this at the beginning. So what you should do is listen to this podcast in reverse.
Yeah. I can just chop this bit out and put it at the beginning if you really want to get crazy. Never going to remember to do that, I'll be honest.
Is being a geek is being a serial obsessive.
Yeah.
Right? That's a very key aspect to being a geek. And kids are natural geeks. They're natural sponges for things, and they're natural enthusiasm engines, right? So being a geek parent to me is just exemplified by supporting your kid's interest, supporting their interest in whatever form that takes. And really, if it is honestly that the kid wants to build Minecraft environments, look, I was surprised that I have a kind of a no video game policy in my house, but I do. And it's mostly because I don't like the way my kids behave after a few hours of playing video games. They behave like little jerks. But I also would like to imagine that if one of them was building super complicated environments in one of his games and actually engaging with it on something other than the level I see them engage at.
Pew.
And again, I could be being an asshole about this, but like that's the thing that's an important thing to support. Penn, on one of his rants recently, Penn Jillette, said exactly that, that you will become, you will get something out of the thing you spend a tremendous amount of time doing. And I don't think that television falls into that category, but, the brain at that age is this really important sponge, and you need to be sweeping lots of things towards it.
Yeah. So there you go. Like, from Geek Dad, which has its own connotations, it's really enabling your kids to be obsessive.
Yes.
And then allowing them to fail.
Yeah.
As simple as
it's
that.
like that. Oh my God, that terrible video that went viral a few weeks ago of the guy whose mom is yelling at him. He's sitting there with a guitar and his mom's just yelling, "What are you doing all day in this room? You're just playing your guitar." And I thought, oh my God, you are doing the polar opposite of what you need to be doing. And I'm so happy that this kid knows what's right and wrong enough to post this online.
Oh, and even if it's like, something like sports, right? Even if it's not something that you typically think of as geeky, right? No, it's just being obsessive about something and enable that.
So John Hodgman, no, you're going to have to cut that part out here.
Okay.
Well, no, sorry. John Hodgman and I had a long conversation once about jocks versus nerds.
He was on the jock side, I assume.
Yeah. But one of the things that I came to at the end of this discussion was that it's a false dichotomy, because you take Michael Jordan and you talk to him about basketball, and he will sound every bit as nerdy as the kid who's seen Star Wars 150 times. Every tiny bit of minutia is important to him in that sport.
Well, the rise of fantasy football and fantasy baseball have totally proven that sports nerds are just as nerdy as the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good place to end. Thank you guys as always. We'll be back next week with more of the Untitled, as yet possibly soon to be titled Adam Savage Project.
Titled, yeah.
Okay, thanks guys.
Bye.
A Brief Conversation With.
There we go. That's a very good label.